Insight AI, powered by Insight Jam.
Hey, it's Doug Atkinson from Solutions Review. We are back with another episode of Insight AI with our special expert, Doug Shannon. You are actually a generative AI influencer, according to all the rumors coming out of the last conference you were at. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I was at a event group called Ignite. They don't really do events, but they're really in the AI space in San Francisco. And so it was the AI Infra Summit. And so really it's interesting because a lot of times when we talk about Gen AI, when we talk about where things are moving, we go into the space of, oh, it's just like the chat side or the prompting side, or how do users and enterprises drive this? But they don't really talk about how much infrastructure it takes to set this up, or what different GPUs you need and what burn-ins look like and how to build those clusters. And it's a lot, but it was fantastic to really have those conversations in San Francisco and, the heart of where all this is really coming from, and seeing not just those groups, but just the actual, the founders of all these different people that I got to meet with. And then luckily, I was labeled as they said, hey, Doug Shannon's here. We're just going to say he's a Gen AI influencer, which I was like, sure. I guess in some circles, right? And then I had my own camera crew that was with me and did a bunch of interviews and kind of like Johnny on the spot. It was great. So I'll be hopefully be getting some of that footage and be sharing that out here soon.
Well, you're certainly a Gen AI and broader still AI influencer for us at Insight Jam. Let's talk about some of the broader implications of automation and artificial intelligence. So there is a strike that just began today as we're recording. And it is a strike of dock workers, longshoremen, and the like. And there's several reasons why they are currently striking, but one of the reasons, and certainly a reason that is relevant in our conversation, is the threat of automation, and I think trying to negotiate some protections against automation. Is that how you read it?
Yeah, I mean, there's automation can be a lot of things. Now, automation in the world of intelligent automation and enterprise automation definitely still plays in some of the actual robotic roles. And so a lot of these unions that are striking, right, they're trying to protect their workers, they're trying to protect the people. And when you hear some of the pundits and the people that are out there talking about this, even the Elons and the Sam Altmans, and they're saying, hey, it's going to take jobs, that's the narrative, right? They're going to say, hey, it's going to take our jobs. Now, is it and should it? But then sometimes people wait and companies wait and enterprises wait to kind of see what happens. And then what you have is you have that same aspect of, you start to see like what they're saying becomes real in a sense, because then you have, these other large companies laying people off. And when they lay them off, even if it's not for AI reasons, and they say, oh, it's for AI reasons, and they use it as a scapegoat, there's an issue there. It becomes real. And so when it becomes real, they become worried, which they should be, because they're seeing like this thing. But really, like, on the alternate side, and what I'm seeing, especially from the automation, intelligent automation, and enterprise side, it shouldn't be that way. What it should be is it should be driving, it's not fire, it's just not hire. So they should be enabling their people, empowering their people, building those efficiencies in, showing those wins, making sure those people know that, hey, we're covered. They're not going to fire us, but we're going to be doing more because we're going to be enabled to do more. And then we're going to be able to talk about what we want to do because we're going to be empowered to do more. And so that's the win, right? And then at that point, you don't hire new people. You're not hiring 500, 10,000 people. Then that's a huge win, because everybody always asks, well, what's the win-loss? How do we save money? What is the ROI? You're not hiring people. Like, that's a huge win.
Yeah, this always strikes me as the worst possible scenario when you go out on strike to protect or to protest or to negotiate against automation, and what you end up with is a bunch of management sitting inside looking out the window at all these workers who have free will and are out there making these human decisions, and I have to believe in the back of their mind, they're like, This is why we need more automation, because the
Yeah.
robots aren't going to go out on strike ever. They're going to never ask for a raise. They're never going to call in sick. They're going to work weekends. All we have to do is plug them in for 8 hours a day, and they'll be right back at it the next day. And truth of the matter is, everything I've read about where things are going in terms of robotics and automation is that it's inevitable that we're going to have automated manual labor.
Yeah, it is. I agree on that point. Like it is inevitable. We're going to have automation. We're going to have physical and software and AI automation all over the place because it's the future at this point. It is showing a lot of wins when it gets down into the mix, and especially with AI agents and some of the stuff, we're seeing massive more use cases. Things are being commoditized. I think this next year is going to be nuts because we're going to start seeing the life cycle of the acquisition cycle, like things being brought together, companies getting bought out to add new light and do that commoditization part of like, how do we build these in together? And this is going to happen to every company and every business and every market and facet. So it is good to have these conversations very early and currently, because we haven't had enough of these conversations really yet. But to your point, it is kind of hard to say, pay us more money, we don't want automation to take over, and yet they're creating a situation where leaders are going to say, well, why wouldn't we? Now, the thing that I usually talk about is I always hate seeing leaders use AI as a excuse or a way to cut that bottom line because people cost money. And then they usually say, oh, how do we save money? Classic, boom, cut people. That shouldn't be the case. Like what I was talking about is like how we shouldn't just do that. And really, these unions and these companies should be looking at the real issue is like our HR side and how people get hired in the first place. And you say, well, everybody changes job every 2 years. Well, and that's like the average. Well, what if they didn't? What if they wanted to stay there because they felt empowered? What if they wanted to stay there because the business alignment was to increase or make them better or, do more with less? That's what they've always talked about. But why alienate your employees, which are your first customers, and consider and then treat them badly? Like I don't understand that.
Well, we're heading into a brave new world of capitalism is going to drive the bus. It always does, and capitalism is going to seek efficiencies, and it doesn't care about your feelings. It doesn't. It never has, and until it is incented or legislated into caring about feelings, it won't. But if it's a free market, you're going to have this yin and yang of private sector, capitalist market forces just wreaking havoc on workforces over automation opportunities. And you're going to have, I think it's inevitable, you're going to see political leaders, because ultimately robots don't vote, but people do. And they're going to weigh in and throw themselves in front of the automation horde and in favor of their constituents, and rightfully so. I mean, that's I think part of what they will naturally need to do, and that will be a really fascinating evolution. Is how does government step in and protect humans against?
Right. I mean, to our last talk we had, like we were talking about the AI bill that came out of California, and we literally called it out, which was great that we were correct, at least in that aspect, that it was going to be vetoed, and it did get vetoed, and it got vetoed because they didn't say why exactly, but the governor was like, hey, I did it because I want to make sure innovation is still thriving and this and that. Great. The reasons were probably to much of the same fact that we were talking about, because it had a giant kill switch thing in there that would not be ease of use for anyone. And it would literally cause Meta to say, okay, cool, we're going to leave California. Nobody wants that in California. So there's probably some big, reasons on that side. But again, like we do need legislation, but I think the problem is, and I've called this out previously, like on posts and whatnot on LinkedIn, but in regards to legislation, in regards to the rules of law that are out there, it's too slow. this same slowness is what we're seeing with enterprises as well. Enterprises,
You mean
yeah,
government's
yeah.
reaction to
I
the
mean, government,
automation?
yeah, government in general has always been slow, like the red tape and all the government bureaucracy, whatever. But in general, when we're talking about legislation on innovation that is driving at the speed of now, it can't keep up. And this is the same stuff we see on the enterprise side. There's no way to keep up because your leaders and like your leaders, your managers, and the people that are actually doing the work are in totally different realms, totally different arenas, and they're in multiple different generations of understandings. And so there is no normal cadence, no normal understanding of how do we even work together? How do you even bring this up in a way that makes sense? And so it's slow. And by being slow, no matter what legislation we put out, it seems like it's always going to be a year to 2 years behind because that kill switch thing was about 2 years behind. And so, if we take it and take parts of it and say, hey, can we do that better? Take out the stuff that doesn't make sense right now, try to get it through as fast as possible, maybe through an agile method, like iterate and iterate, we get a better result and we actually find a semblance or a balance.
Well, but I mean, what is the case here for not pushing? I don't see how this ends well for workers. I mean, they're just not going to be competitive. I mean, it is just as simple as that. And in the end, until you incent organizations to become, I don't know, responsive to that, or
right,
or operate not in their purest capitalist best interest,
that's gonna be hard to do.
Well, you're again, this is the brave new world because we've never seen this before.
Yes.
I mean, it's one thing when we offshored for cheaper. It's another thing when the automotive industry has been retooled completely on the shop floor, and you don't see, on the assembly line, you don't see a lot of workers the way you used to. That's what's going to happen in every manual industry.
Yeah, I mean, I was even talking. I had my tires changed the other day. I mean, it's just a story, right? And the guy that was doing it was like, "Oh man, I don't know if I can do this for another 10 years. My back just can't handle it." I was like, "Man, I'm glad you're doing it, not me," because I would be doing the same thing, like, "Oh man, my back." But I was thinking about it. I was like, this is the same thing that Tesla was talking about, which again we previously talked about, was like remote controlled, VR controlled robots, to where you would just be in VR and doing the same movements. Well, your back's not hurting. You're just sitting in a chair. You're like chilling in bed or whatever it is, but you're still able to move and do the work, interact with the customer in a very human way, but with a robot avatar. And so all that's coming to play. Like, again, you say Brave New World, like that's it. Like maybe this is the way the dock workers thing do, to roll it back to what we were talking about, is that maybe, again, you don't have to get rid of everybody. You don't have to get rid of even some. Maybe you start to train them on what else can we do? Can some of these jobs be done remotely? Can some of these jobs be done in a way that our workers can do longer? We have the same issue with like Japan, and they have a very long lasting workers that are very older. And it's fantastic that the culture there tries to, help that out and make that better. And it's fantastic. But how do you support them when their body starts to give out? How do you keep that going while still being cognizant of that aspect, right? Like what do you do? So maybe there's some wins there.
Well, let's talk about how the world of work is changing in another development recently, which was that Amazon announced that they were going to ask all of their employees to start coming into the office 5 days a week. Back to work, back to the office.
Yeah.
And if depending upon what social media feed you have, the outrage meter was popping. And I know you have weighed in on this issue. What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, I try to take a very human approach, but I also, luckily, I've got to meet a lot of Amazon people and a lot of people that have worked with their aspects of like Gen AI, what they're producing there, their bedrock models, and talking to them. Some of these guys are the smartest people I've met. Like they do really well. They understand the technology, and they know how to drive it forward. But how did they get to that point, right? Because that was my question recently when I was talking to a guy I met, and I was like, how do you know what you know? Because talking to many other people out there, not many people get it. And so he was saying that Amazon takes a approach of every Friday they do training and they really drive that forward. And in that training, they're getting better and better. And then they strive to kind of like help each other out and like really get to know it. And they have moments where they talk about it. And so really it looked like Amazon was going to take the approach of let's do a 4-day work week. And that 5th day is really just training. That would have been fantastic. They didn't do that. They said, well, let's throw it all onto the table. Let's bring them all back in, which, I mean, my first question would be like, are all the managers and all the leaders going to go back in? Because I bet you they're not. But in general, I don't want to have too much hearsay there. But in general, that's the ask, right? And so if they do that, I see, and my point was, if you have highly talented people and they know they're highly talented and that talent is sought after because there is a war for talent going on right now in the space, and you're asking them to come back in, you're going to lose a ton of people. One, you have to know that. So is that the point? Or if you didn't know that and say maybe you were oblivious to this fact, maybe then you're like, oh no, they'll just come to work because no matter what. But I see a lot of talent leaving, and I see the next company that comes up and says, hey, we will do a 4-day work week. Because really, if you're enabled, if you're digitally savvy, if you did automation first and you're driving to Gen AI and you're building those solutions in, there's wins. And those wins can give you a 4-day work week. But that 4-day work week, that 5th day, again, like we were talking about, how do these dock workers, how do these people that are worried about their jobs being taken by AI, so let them start using it, teach them how to use it, drive that day to say, get in there, get your hands dirty, trust but verify, figure it out, and like start building your own kind of use cases. How would you use this? Here's some examples. And that's the win. And the company that does that is going to get the talent, and they're going to be able to pay their people more, and they're going to be able to outbeat everybody else. So I don't know if it's good.
I have to believe that there's a couple of things at play, but this is purely speculation on my part. One is that they may not want everybody back, and they are going to let this self-select a kind of risk
self-attrition, right?
as they kind of, and they don't have to deal with the consequences of that.
I think it was like 350,000.
And rather than laying, I mean, again, I think there's potentially a little bit of that baked in. They have to have done the math on this thing and figured out what
there's like a common level of attrition, and then there's a caused attrition, and then there's like attrition.
Yeah, but secondarily, I think honestly, I think they've probably also done the math and said, you know what, we're not as productive. We're just simply not as productive as we were prior to the pandemic. And I think everybody who says, me spending 2 hours in traffic is blah, 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 every day, I get that. But I think, and I hate to be the one, I'm a come into office kind of guy. I always come into the office. I came into the office and found excuses to come into the office. I've been commuting for a long time. I think I added it up. I think it's been 35 years that I've been commuting in my life. And
that's a lot of miles.
It's a lot of miles. And I'm still commuting. And I'm, it is what it is. But I will tell you that I am way more productive being in the office than I have ever been when I'm not in the office. And I just, again, I'm old school. I just don't believe that people are as productive. I mean, I know I've seen the world between 9 and 5 when just out and about during the work week. And it seems like there are a lot of people that are doing a lot of things outside in nice weather in the summer, when you would expect that they wouldn't be outside in doing leisurely things.
Yeah, you go to the local
and again, I think you can convince yourself of a lot of work-life balance, time spent. I'm going to get up in the morning and I'm going to work from 7 to 9, and then I'll walk the dog, and then I'll go.
Yeah,
I don't know. I have to believe Amazon has done the math there too, and I think there is a reason why I don't think they're trying to get rid of people. I think they're trying to get people to be as productive as they can be for the money that they're paying them. And I think they are also willing to bet that more people will want to work at Amazon than not. And so,
Yeah, I mean, there's like work, and then there's like value, and then there's like happiness of your employees, right? Because I could definitely say, being like a remote worker, I'm definitely much more happier. I feel like I get more done being remote because I'm not spending that time commuting, or I don't have to get up and then waste like an hour or 2 hours just like driving, and then you got to go from there. And then you don't have a choice, because then actually I think people that are remote are actually more healthy and happier, because not only can you make your meals and plan your day, get it done, take a break, do the laundry or something, but then like in general, like you're more available to even like your children if you need to be. So there's a lot of value there that I think is missed out, mainly because it's hard to track it all. But I agree that there are definite wins with being person to person. There's definite wins of being like in a room with a team driving a project, especially if there's like deadlines. There's some fantastic work there. But you can also time box that and have live meetings and do it the right way and have a
but to be honest, I mean, let's be honest, the organic interactions you get from being in an office cannot be replicated. And I hold this one, I hold the line on this one hardcore. There is no way to replicate the water cooler conversations that happen inside an office, and the informal mentoring that goes on inside an office, person to person, in a if we're talking about what we were talking about previously, that humans have a particular intrinsic value. Interaction, those organic interactions between humans inside an office cannot be replicated. I don't care how hard you try; they cannot be replicated virtually. It's impossible.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with it can't be replicated at the same level of that you're speaking to, because of the point of there is unwritten things, there are unverbal things, there are unverbal cues, there are the way that a person moves their body, the way that they position their arms, are they crossed, are they uncrossed, how are their shoes, their feet pointed towards you or away from you, if they want to be part of a conversation or not. But there's also some other aspects, like sometimes the water cooler talks turn into like a toxic situation, work situations. If somebody's not happy or they're a negative employee, they can actually cause a more negative connotation with the rest of the employee group. So there's pros and cons, but I do agree in person is always going to be the best approach, but maybe there's a happy medium there.
Yeah, no, I think that's where a decision like this for Amazon is so fascinating, because they're not the company I would expect to be the ones that threw down. I just didn't see them being the ones. I thought it would be like
Google or
Oracle, somebody a little more
classic, a little classical style. SAP
classic. Yeah, but again, just like everybody was fascinated when Musk took over Twitter and laid off 80% of the workforce, and the thing still worked. I think a lot of these tech companies looked at that and have been privately talking amongst themselves and saying, do we need all these people? I mean, do we really need this cost? Should we be preparing for our own the impact that we're going to receive with regard to AI and automation? I mean, I think there's a lot of evolution happening there. And again, capitalism is undefeated, and I think they are looking at it very
passionately,
well, and ruthlessly.
Yes,
these are not decisions that are necessarily in the best interest of individuals.
Yeah, the biggest thing is just as long as we keep the human aspect in there, that's the biggest. We don't want to lose that part, right? We want to make sure that, yes, we are keeping people in the loop, finding a way to keep them in person, but finding a way to also give them time to get through their day, because, people are stressed. I know working 8 to 5 every day, seeing people stressed because they couldn't get the things they needed to do to be done home. And some people play different roles at the house. And there's a lot of stresses there too. But if we can find that medium and find that, like, hey, what do you need, but can you get the job done? Do we know what they're doing versus what they're not doing? Then that's a goal. And really, I mean, we're starting to see agents, we're starting to see technology drive those same lines of understanding the unstructured data to say, like, well, what else is happening that we haven't seen? And then by seeing that, all that shadow IT stuff, all those shadow groups that were doing duplicate effort, we're starting to get visibility into that now. And that's really where the technology is driving. And so I think that's some of the cool parts we're going to see really make changes with what we're seeing here.
All right, let's take a break. And when we get back, we'll have a little show and tell.
When you go to that water cooler, we'll take a break and get some water.
Solutions Review is inviting you to join InsightJam.com. What started a few years ago as a social media event to celebrate enterprise technology has now grown into an always-on tech community with live events, discussions, videos, vendor showcases, and industry resources. Our vetted roster of experts, thought leaders, and analysts are sharing tips and tricks daily. So if you're interested in getting involved, join the long list of companies and brands who have already participated by visiting InsightJam.com today.
All right, Doug, as promised, we're going to do a little show and tell, actually a little listen and tell, and get your reaction to this little clip of audio.
Yeah.
Didn't actually make AI any safer.
Okay.
And second, he was worried
Yeah.
that it would stifle innovation and basically send companies packing.
Oh, so they just go somewhere else.
Exactly, to states with looser rules.
So California loses its competitive edge.
Exactly.
And this whole concern about stifling innovation wasn't new, was it?
No, it wasn't.
Like, I feel like even before the veto experts were saying,
Oh, yeah.
this is going to cause problems.
For sure, experts like Doug Shannon were already talking about this.
What do you say?
So Shannon, who's a big deal in the AI and automation world,
Okay.
he said trying to regulate AI with SB 2047
Yeah.
was like requiring a kill switch for Linux
Okay.
to shut down all web servers running Apache.
So trying to like jam a square peg in a round hole, basically.
Exactly. It just doesn't really make sense.
Right.
He was advocating for more agile and forward-looking legislation,
Okay.
which Newsom seemed to agree with, because in his veto, he really emphasized the need for more research and a better understanding before implementing any regulations that are that sweeping.
All right,
So
I
you're
think we
saying
can,
not everyone was happy
we
with this
can we
veto.
can cut it there because I think you know what you're listening to.
Right. That
But
definitely.
but every time I hear it, I am absolutely floored by how good it is. This is
It's the Turing test, right?
Notebook LM by Google. This is the quote-unquote deep dive podcast, which can be produced by simply uploading
text.
any piece of content. We uploaded your article on LinkedIn, I believe, around
Yep.
the
Right,
California
the
legislation.
California, 1047.
And then they layer in this back and forth informal conversation, podcasting audio.
Yeah.
And it sounds perfect.
It sounds
It's
good.
if you didn't know what it was, you would not know. I actually played it for our team. We did one for us, and I played for our team yesterday, and for the company, and didn't tell them, and they thought, and it was about our stuff. They thought it was a podcast that they hadn't listened to. They didn't know.
I mean, again, like I mentioned, like this is the Turing test right there. Like, did you know? And if you didn't, were you fooled? Because that was all AI. Like, luckily, I mean, I'm in the space, so I hear the attenuation. I'm like, okay, no, that's AI. And two, luckily, I do a lot of research, and so as soon as I heard, I'm like, okay, I know it's the podcasting that was done by Google. It was Notebook LM, right? So that's cool though, right? I mean, it's very interesting.
Cool.
It was interesting to
Cool
hear.
is like not even the word for it. I can't even begin to describe. This is ChatGPT for audio. This is a whole different thing.
And a conversation, right? Because they create.
This is not just another AI thing. This is a mind blower to me. I mean, this was when I first saw ChatGPT 2 years ago, whenever it was. I
Never would
was
have thought this.
blown away. But when I heard this last week,
Yep.
I was. This is 1.0. It'll never get worse than this.
It never gets worse than this. Yeah, it's
and
going to get better.
Almost imperceptible. You can fool anybody with that.
Yeah.
Not you, perhaps, but you can fool almost everybody.
The thing is, like, as soon as you take that same framework and you put that in using like OpenAI's voice, right, where it takes breaths and adds attenuation, like much more cleaner. Yes, this is the worst version you're going to get. And so my concern is that it is good enough to just be out there. Like, I could turn every post I do into that, but like, is it then over synthesizing synthetic data? Like, when does it come to the point when people say, wait, no, I want a conversation like a live, authentic conversation like that Doug and Doug have, right? Like this AI Insights is a live form.
For how long? I mean,
I don't
it's
know,
like
yeah.
TLDR. I mean, if you have a
Like
if you have a
VHS
long
versus beta,
form
right?
white paper or some long form case study that you're being presented to download and read, or you have the option of having whoever these
Different-
two characters are
Different approaches.
hash it out for you for 8 minutes. What's I mean, it's almost like every long form piece of content will have this TLDR kind of podcast button.
Well, I mean,
or
you see
something
that
along these lines.
you see that
Break
in
it
like,
down for me.
yeah, Wall Street News, right? Like, or like the Wall Street Journal has these things where instead of reading it, you can listen to it, which is fantastic, especially for those of us that are like typing, doing other things, and we're like, we just want to hear what's going on so we can ingest more research or ingest more information. Even if like the Gen Zs are like, they're so far behind on information. This is why their attention span is like 2 minutes. They have a literal cloud of information they need to pull down. And luckily we got to live through it all. So they have to like learn really quick before the Gen Alphas come in and they have to deal with that. So, but the breakdown is if every article could now become this and take two different stances, what if you never have to go to CNN or Fox ever again? You say, hey, you pretend you're Fox, you pretend you're CNN. Fight it out. Give me the middle ground.
Welcome to the future. This is where it's going. I mean, everything is in jeopardy. This is where it is all going. Everything is in jeopardy.
I mean, that's
everything, and
it could be,
including browsers, including search. I mean, the largest companies on the planet are going to be under threat. This is the largest media companies, the largest tech companies.
The media companies could be under threat. Definitely. I mean, they're going to use it too. So, I mean, the first ones to use it are going to be the winners in some cases, but they're also going to push the technology to a point where, again, they may not be needed because it's the same thing as like the thing we were talking about previously. But
I believe that people will eventually get these things tuned to a point where they prefer them.
Well,
They prefer this generic or tuned that makes references that are relevant to the listener and tuned to the listener perfectly, so that they're making references and they're using analogies that are spot on for that person, and they're using language that person understands completely, and they're not using language that person has never heard before. And you are to the point where it's like, I'd rather get it from this thing because, again, as a human, I can't tell anymore.
Yeah, but what if they tailor it? What if they say, hey, you're a baby boomer. How do you explain this to a baby boomer? And like, now that's what you listen to. What if you tailor to that point? What if you tailor to the point of like, you're a male or a female or, this age or that age?
Why wouldn't you?
I mean, you could. And that also potentially comes dangerous too in a way, because it depends on how it is. What's the weight?
Of course it does. But how do you not? It's like social media feeds. It's like everything else that we've been experimented on. It's like this is nobody gets. But truth of the matter is we haven't been asked for our permission.
This is
ultimately.
True. This is something that
from what social media has done to us over the last 10 or 15 years. Nobody asked us.
Right.
Nobody asked for our permission to completely create echo chambers for people and suck them out of the mainstream and into these bubbles of tuned information.
Yeah.
It's just
this could do the same thing, but 100 times worse.
Yep.
Because the same thing. So there's GANs, right? GANs are general adversarial networks. And the way that they work in the digital and the data security side is that you have a tester, like a pen tester, and then you have like a Sherlock Holmes detective. And so this one tries to do a bunch of stuff, and this one says, that's fake, or nah, that's cool, or I actually don't know the difference. Cool, let's use that. And so as this goes through, and it gets really dialed into like the different generations, the different sexes, the different people, the different backgrounds, you can listen to however you want to listen to it. You can say, I only want Democratic or I only want Republican news. Like,
that's what people will get.
And that's
what they're getting right now.
That is what they're getting.
That's what they're getting right now.
Like,
on Facebook, on Twitter, on
it will
on
further
Instagram,
divide
wherever they
society.
get their information.
There is a massive chance of further divide in society if we go that route.
It will only get more divided. There's
Yeah.
no
If you could choose your own
there's no
adventure,
preventing it anymore. There's no
choose-
preventing it. We used to get the same information. We had 3 channels when I was a kid. There was ABC, CBS, and NBC, and that was it. There wasn't even. That was it. You got those 3 channels.
Yeah, those 3 views,
that
those
was
3,
homogenized, mass media that was delivered into every home. Now, it just doesn't work that way. And one could argue that we're not better off for it, but that isn't stopping it or slowing it down at all.
That's going to be a interesting onion to peel back.
Well, when I heard that, to get back to the just pure technology of it, it's just I can't even it's literally makes me speechless.
Well, I mean, actually, let's relate it to something. It's I can't grab it, but it's like the War of the Worlds, right? When that came on the radio, everyone was like, "Oh my God, aliens are attacking us!" Right? Like it's happening outdoors. Like the way they did it, they fooled everyone. So this essentially could be that.
Well, I mean, actually, that's a good example of what the world used to be like. There was one source of information, the radio, and it was one channel, and one channel could convince enough people, and there was no way to verify it or vet it or disprove it in any other. There was one source of information. You were actually that's the perfect example, because the War of the Worlds was a single radio broadcast to an area in New Jersey, and there was no way to get a different perspective. And so
there was no way to validate, right? You couldn't trust.
You just accepted it, and what we have now in these little echo chambers that social media has built for us is similar things. If we don't look outside the bubble, the information just continues to reinforce itself to the point where we start to believe things that aren't really true.
It's interesting as the radio part, where it used to be the radio and that was the one source of information at a time. But however, now when technology is enabled, that technology, that radio of technology, we are now the one source it's providing to. So the AI is providing us, it's taking our information and providing it back to us to influence us. And now with the demo that you provided with the audio there, like it can do it in a much broader aspect that even people that are growing up now won't know the difference. Those of us that are in the space, like I can hear certain things. I'm like, wait, there's something suspect about that. But it's going to get better and better with GANs, with this aspects of like trial and error, the fact that we've lost the social media war. Yeah, I see it. I see a massive divide coming without controls being in place. And this is also why I've been recently talking about, like, we don't just need, kind of like in the last episode, we talked about the White House in the United States here has like the AI Bill of Rights. That's great. It has like some neat aspects to it, but we need like a personable, like a personal inalienable rights as a human, that AI shouldn't be able to do certain things. It shouldn't be able to fool us, because it should be noted like this is an AI thing. It shouldn't be able to talk us into doing something that we wouldn't do on our own, like peer pressure, things that we learn out of society as we grow up and stuff like that. If it's going to like fine tune us, I don't know if that's a good thing, right? And so we do have to talk about these things, and we have to have discussions, because if we don't, then we're not in the race. We're just the byproduct at that point. And if we're just going to be sold to and not have a voice in the matter, there's a massive issue there and a massive disconnect that is very concerning.
Well, I think this is part of why this time in our civilization is so fascinating, because you are at a stage where this technology is becoming so advanced that it is having real implications.
Yeah.
And you're having conversations. There are conversations happening now at the highest levels of government around the ideas of limiting the First Amendment and starting to tune, because they can't control the information anymore. Because in the old days, when there was just radio and television and 3 channels and mass media, you could control the information to a degree, and it was relatively within the margins. But now with this, very tuned, some people will tell you everything that faction of the country is listening to is complete lies and disinformation.
Right.
And those people will say the same exact thing about the other side, and they'll both believe it.
Right.
All the way through to the point where you cannot convince them, either of them.
And sometimes it leads to even violence and stuff, and that's horrible, because I was just having a same conversation with a friend of mine recently, and I said, hey, like, it's actually fantastic. We both believe totally separate things. Yet, at the end of the day, I love having the conversation, because I'm not there to change his view. He's not there to change mine, but I can appreciate the discussion, because at the same time, like, at the end of the day, we're doing what was taught to us. We're doing what was learned, and what is the whole point of being in the United States and being in a way that we have a democracy where we can vote one way or the other. But without having the discussion, and like, if it leads to like violence, or it leads to something, like, it's not appropriate. It gets us nowhere. It puts us backwards, and that's not the direction we need to go, especially with the way that AI is moving, the way that the world of technology is moving around us, and the fact that it's potentially going to be, in some cases, used as an enemy to us. We need to be aware of that. And if we can't focus on something, usually it does help us as a society when we do have something to focus on. Maybe we should focus on the thing in front of us that is coming, that may have more implications than we may have realized.
Want more Insight Jam? Follow us on Instagram for exclusive content like a daily dose of best practices and buying advice from industry experts and leading solution providers. Or subscribe to our YouTube channel for long-form highlights from our expert panel discussions. The Solutions Review team is hard at work collecting the best enterprise technology information from around the globe, so don't miss out.
Well, and what we have seen, and Google has demonstrated a certain bias
Yes.
in the way that it's trying to present information in AI generated. At least in the past, I think last year there were some pretty hilarious examples of Google image generation around things that were clearly it was incapable of presenting, fairly
Historical fact, right?
fairly obvious historical facts
Yeah.
around founding fathers and Nazis and so forth in a way that was laughably woke. And so let's talk about where the fact checks and the hallucination correction starts to kick in based upon some of these large technology companies that are producing this. I mean, Google produced the Notebook LM, and one might wonder, and I don't think we've seen examples of this yet, but what happens if you uploaded some manifesto from some right-leaning?
I mean, that's a whole new way to indoctrinate.
How does
people, right?
How does Google's little deep dive LM deal
Fight
with
against
that?
something? Yeah.
I mean,
does
it
Yeah,
passionately discuss, something
it could be
that the Google, the woke monsters at Google would find reprehensible? I mean, can it do that? I don't know. I think we'll probably see that.
I mean, I
happen,
imagine
but
there's keywords that it looks for, right? I mean, right now, the biggest issues in Gen AI is the fact that still, like, hallucinations will never go away, but with the right grounding, the right fine tuning, they're like at a 0.02% chance, and that's okay, because you're using grounding, you're using your own knowledge, you're using your own enterprise knowledge and what have you to actually keep that in line. And it has to have hallucinations to a point, so that it can actually understand the nuance of what it's dealing with. And if it doesn't understand, it's going to try to think outside of that norm to find, what are you talking about, right? What is it, as the user prompting this thing or interacting with this, what is it looking for?
Well, so Microsoft revealed their correction service.
Yes.
Which is an automatically AI generated. I don't know.
It's a tool to try to correct, right? So when you have the biggest issue that we're also seeing in enterprise, and Microsoft definitely sees this, is the fact that companies want to use these models. They want to do these things, but none of them have filtered the data. None of them have built categorization around their data. So they don't know what IT versus HR versus, finance is. So how do you ground data that hasn't been defined? And this is the same reason why you had the thing you were talking about, like Google couldn't put historical fact to things when they were doing images and stuff because of werewolves and vampires and stuff. So the aspect of that is, how do you do that? Well, you take more AI to fight AI, to build synthetic data around what is known to be the norm, and then layer that in and then say, oh, look, your hallucinations are better, because it doesn't just answer the question. It does build in more refinement and more kind of like quote unquote fine tuning, but it is synthetic data that is being overlaid to build a better understanding of nuanced things that it pulls from. So does it do the job? Yes. But are we using AI now to validate AI? Yeah. Is that good?
So, right. So the turn of the phrase at TechCrunch was that it fact checks,
itself.
right? This is one of these great terms, right? Fact checking. It fact checks it by comparing the text with a source of truth. Another great term.
Right.
These are straight up subjective.
Yes. Sometimes the source of truth is Wikipedia. I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day about like how AI has gotten to the point where we used to not have AI and we use Wikipedia, and we were told in college and everything else, don't use Wikipedia as a 100% source because it's not factual. Yet now we're using AI as factual as can be, and it's worse in some cases than Wikipedia. So where do we go, right? And then now some of these sources are pulling from like Wikipedia or pulling from sites that are known not to be correct. It's not going to Snopes or something and saying, what's the myth? Is this true or false? It's not doing that. So it's 100% subjective.
You have all of this powered by large technology companies that have a political bias one way or another. I mean, one could argue that some of them go one way, some could argue that some of them go the other way. Regardless how that leans, the source of truth is
a
very subjective concept.
Right. I don't know if I would say fully political. I would say like in general, inherently, all data out there on the internet is biased data because humans put it there. And if humans didn't put it there, I don't know where it came from. So in general, we are biased creatures, and that has to be understood first and foremost. I'm biased. Everyone's biased. Everyone supposedly carries like 50 different biases with them at every time. That has to be understood. And we have to take a professional, like level up past our normal human. Don't interrupt me. Don't break my boundaries. Like, let's just talk about it and say, I get it. If your shoes are dirty or your hair is matted or heaven forbid, like I have something on my face, like people are going to say, oh, that Doug guy, I don't know about that. It's fine. We're all humans. We make mistakes, and it's okay to make mistakes. This is actually where I go in to talk about brave spaces and get away from the whole safe space thing. Brave spaces are there, and they need to become back into the business because it's okay to be wrong. People don't hear that enough. People were raised in my generation and your generation to be like, no, we have to be perfect. You don't have to be perfect. You have to understand, like, it's going to take an iterative journey. It's going to take a time and place. You're going to screw up, and that's okay. That's why you have a team. That's why you should have a good manager that hopefully businesses stop layering all like 160% of work on these people because managers can't manage anymore. They're too busy running everything else and fighting fires all day. They can't even manage their own people. So how are you supposed to support the human element if you don't have the time to do it? And so that's, again, your employees should be your first customer. And if they're not, you're doing business wrong.
The places that we're going with automation, artificial intelligence, and the impact that it's going to have on not only the workplace, but on political thought, facts, synthetic generated data, and generational data on top of generational data is anybody's guess. It's chasing your tail. I mean, there's no way that this is going to be a perfect science because in the end, you're right. Everything has an inherent bias.
So, I mean, on synthetic data really came from looking at the future of like Web3 and digital twins. So synthetic data is a great tool when used correctly, but it's a measuring tool, not a target. And so when you use it as a measure and you say, hey, I have my enterprise, this is what I know about it. I've learned it. I know it. We know the processes. We know how everything moves. We know how we make money and how we drive it. And great, we're going to put a layer on there that is a simulation layer of simulated data. Great. Now that simulation can do all kinds of other things. And then we can see, knowing this prime directive here, we can actually change something and see how it interacts with that prime. That is a digital twin. And it's a measure. But if you make it a target and you say everything's going to do this, and you're going to say that's the target, you're going to get bad targets. And that's the risk. And that's part of what we're kind of talking about here on the risks of this. And especially when you're gamifying that and you're taking human elements and making them non-human, because now the voices and how they can interact and how it can, we need a new test because the Turing test has been destroyed so many times now. How do we know when AI gets to the next point? It was the Turing test. What's the next one? And nobody's come up with a good solution. We used to say, oh, well, like lately it's been like, oh, how many R's are in strawberry or whatever berry you want to do. And it's still not counting that right. That's one thing, but it's solving and doing things even we're seeing like PhD level now. So like, what's the next test? How do we know what it is or isn't? So,
well, it is doing PhD level. That was one of the other interesting pieces of information that came out this week was the idea that OpenAI, what's the
O1, the strawberry
O1,
yeah,
is operating at a PhD level.
It's hitting those targets, right? Again, like there's a lot of tests that have been done. And sometimes I worry about that too. I may be incorrect in this, but I'm just going to say it anyway. But in regards to the testing that is done and say, hey, here's our parameters for all of our Gen AI models and our large language models. And we're going to do these tests. Well, you already know the tests and you can kind of gamify that too. But are you like, how do you handle other stuff? And this is why we do like one shots, and some of the groups and the researchers will do some of that too, to kind of offset the proof. But in general, like, again, we need better tests now. Like, when do we get to the point where we're testing understanding? And this is where I talk about with like, when I talk about the autonomous enterprise, when you say, do we have chain of thought now that people are looking for? Now, I say there's two more chains. There's chain of reasoning and then there's chain of custody. Because how do you really know what it's doing? How can it tell you what it's doing if it's not showing you what it used? Like Perplexity does a little bit of this. It says, hey, I used this link. This is the source of truth I used. Great. That's a chain of custody. And it's in so many words without understanding like the role-based access control that was used around it when you're an enterprise. But great. It's showing me something that it pulled from. But then the chain of reasoning, it's not still providing that. No one provides that at this point to say, okay, AI, why did you think that? Where did you come up with that? Why are you, when you had the discussion with the people there, why did you take those stances? Like, what are the weights there? And the weights are very invisible on purpose because that's their intellectual property. They try to hide that because they don't want you to know how they're doing what they're doing. But then how, as humans, again, how do we learn from AI? How do we learn from a PhD level AI how it got to that point? Nobody knows. And that's the other risk.
Well, and I think what you're going to find is that there are going to be things that are just simply binary that you can trust, that AI can produce for you either arithmetically or through other kind of simple binary computations that, it has extrapolated, the right answer based upon its ability to process. And then you're going to find the problem you're going to find is that your trust in this source of binary truth is also trying to present you with an interpreted truth that is not binary. It is more subtle than that. It's a position. It's an opinion, or it's
Right.
A take. And what you're going to find is that some people, by the nature of trusting the binary, will begin to trust the
take or the
opinion
that's being provided.
and then in reverse, you won't trust the opinion because it presents the founding fathers in imagery that is not historically accurate, and so you begin to doubt its ability to produce binary truth. I mean, you're going to have both of these things, and we're human beings are going to be overwhelmed by their ability to know what to trust, know what the source is. This Turing test that you're talking about, you're right. The human condition is to make a fast determination as to whether or not I can. This is real
or not real. I mean,
real or not real. And once I've determined that, then I'm on one side of believing, way further along to believing than not. And again, if you tell me a few lies along the way that I agree with, I'll believe all of them. Because
you fall for one, you fall for all in some cases.
And as long as they're tuned to what I want to believe, I'm
true, because it's talking to you as like a person, and it kind of
and humans they don't want their opinions challenged. They want their opinions confirmed.
Right. And this is something we do as humans in general, right? Like this goes back to how we were made. You're a baby, you're alive, and you're like, hey, I'm out in the world. You're looking at faces, you're trying to understand, are they smiling? Like you're automatically looking for these like social cues. And then you go out into the world and you see every car and then the bumpers of every car and their brake lights, like there's faces there. Why do I see faces in that? Oh, that's a human thing, because you're trying to communicate, you're trying to collaborate. We are a collaborative species by nature, and we want to see ourselves in these things. We want to see our beliefs in these things. And it can be gamified, and we've seen it. We saw social media do this, and AI is going to follow suit.
It's absolutely going to follow suit.
It's insane. Yeah,
because in the end, it is a game of adoption, and anybody who thinks that this is just we're all doing this for. I mean, we won't even get into it, but Sam Altman, who has spent the last 5 years telling everybody he was just doing it for the pure benefit to society, has now finagled himself a multi-billion, tens of billions of dollars of stake in OpenAI as a private company, when he went in front of Congress and told them all that
I don't make anything.
He didn't have any financial interest, and
there's a long game, and it definitely looks like he was in it for the Benjamins. So I don't know.
Well, we can get into all that maybe on another time. For now, I think we'll end it there. But there's always plenty of stuff to talk about, and so we'll get into more as we go along. But Doug, always a pleasure to spend some time with you talking through all this stuff. Nice job on that deep dive podcast. They seem to really like your
surprise, because I did not expect. I didn't know that you just like spun it on me. I was like, cool, let's do it. Like, because again, that's what we do here. Like my why of why I show up and why we, as a good point of this is authenticity. The same stuff I post online is the same stuff I'm going to come out and I'm going to talk about here live, and well, it's like recorded, but even then, but it's fairly live. And the things we talk about is very real topics, and that's the human approach. Now AI can take that, and then it can take the recording, and then it can recreate it. Great. But this was it done by humans, and it was live, and I think that's a great thing, and probably we need more of that. And so I appreciate being here, Doug.
Well, in the not too distant future, I'm sure we will have an episode where neither of us show up, and yet we both have a nice lively conversation with one another, and we
can try it and see what happens,
and we can react to our avatars podcast.
Yeah, that'd be fun. But until next time.